All right, let's talk about something we all deal with every single day, the wandering mind. You know the feeling? You're trying to focus on one thing, but your brain is off somewhere else, replaying a conversation from last week or planning a vacation you're not even taking yet. We're going to get into exactly why that happens.
So let's just get right to it with a question you've probably asked yourself 1,000 times, right? Maybe when you're trying to fall asleep or just get through a meeting. If these are my thoughts in my head, why can't I seem to control them? Why do they feel like they have a mind of their own?
Well, you know, there's actually a name for this feeling, and it's been around for centuries, the monkey mind. It's a Buddhist term that perfectly describes that restless, frantic chatter inside our heads. It's like there's a little monkey in there, just leaping from one thought branch to the next, never, ever sitting still.
And here's where it gets kind of weird, right? We all want to believe we're the captains of our own ship, the masters of our own minds. But the simple fact is, we can't seem to command our own attention, sometimes for even a few seconds. That little monkey just keeps running the show.
Okay, so what's the science behind all this? Well, for the longest time, we didn't really have a good answer. But then, almost by mistake, scientists stumbled upon the very engine inside our brain that drives all this distraction. You see, for years, when scientists were doing brain scans, they were mostly interested in what parts of the brain lit up when a person was doing a task. Everything else, when the brain was just resting, was considered background noise. But then, a neurologist named Marcus Reichel and his team had this brilliant idea. They decided to flip the script and look at what parts of the brain turned off during a task. And what they found changed everything. They discovered this whole hidden, interconnected system. And they gave it a name, the default mode network, or DMN for short. Why? Because this state of internal chatter, of mind wandering, that's the brain's default setting. And this is the big takeaway. That noise they used to ignore? Turns out it wasn't noise at all. It was the main event. This is the network that's always on, thinking about us, our memories, and what we're doing tomorrow.
Okay, so our brain has a default mode that loves to daydream and wander off. So what? What's the big deal? Well, as it turns out, having this feature built in comes with some pretty serious costs to our everyday lives.
Before I show you the number, just take a second. Think about your day so far, from the moment you woke up to right now. What percentage of that time was your mind somewhere else, thinking about something other than what you were actually doing? Just take a guess.
A huge study used an iPhone app to ping people randomly throughout the day and ask them what they were thinking about. And the result was, honestly, it's pretty staggering. The answer is almost half the time, 46.7% of our waking life.
Let's put that into perspective, because that's a huge number. If you're awake for, say, 16 hours, that means for almost 6.5 of those hours, basically a full workday, you are completely lost in thought, your default mode network just running the show on autopilot.
So what does this really mean? Well, it kind of throws a wrench in our whole idea of free will, doesn't it? As the philosopher Thomas Metzinger puts it, this constant involuntary wandering is a form of mental autonomy loss. We're just not in the driver's seat nearly as much as we like to think.
But that's not all. The very same study that figured out how much our minds wander also discovered a direct and, frankly, pretty troubling connection between this default state and our overall happiness.
Over and over again, people reported being less happy when their minds were wandering. It didn't matter what they were doing. Even if they were doing something boring, they were happier if they were focused on it. And here's the kicker. The data showed that the mind wandering caused the unhappiness. It wasn't that people were unhappy and then their minds wandered. Nope. The wandering itself was making them unhappy.
And this really hammers home how vital this DMN is for our mental health. When it goes haywire, the consequences can be serious. In depression, the DMN is often hyperactive, which drives that constant, painful cycle of rumination. In schizophrenia, it doesn't quiet down when it's supposed to, which can blur the line between what's real and what's in your head.
Okay, so are we just stuck with this distraction machine running our lives? Is this just how it is? Well, no, not exactly. It turns out there are proven ways to quiet this machine down and start taking back control of our attention.
The first path is an old one, a really old one, meditation. And let's be clear, it's not about magically stopping your thoughts. That's impossible. It's about developing something called meta-awareness, which is just a fancy way of saying you get better at noticing when the monkey has started swinging. And every time you notice it and gently bring your focus back, that's like doing a push-up for your brain.
And get this, it's not just some feel-good idea. We can actually see this in brain scans. Long-term meditators have fundamentally rewired their brains. Their new default mode is one of quiet, focused presence, not restless chatter. They've literally trained their DMN.
Now the second path, well, it's a lot more radical and a whole lot faster. Psychedelics like psilocybin from magic mushrooms can cause a dramatic and immediate, though temporary, shutdown of the default mode network. It's less like building a muscle over time and more like hitting a giant reset button on your brain.
This leads to a state that researchers have this really cool name for, the entropic brain. Think of it like a blacksmith working with metal. Our normal thought patterns are like cold, rigid steel. A psychedelic experience heats up the brain, making it flexible and malleable. As it cools back down, new, healthier connections and thought patterns can form. This is a huge reason why it's showing so much promise for things like treatment-resistant depression.
What's wild is that both of these very different paths, one through years of patient discipline, the other through a few hours of intense chemistry, can lead to the same mind-blowing experience, something called ego dissolution. It's that moment where the DMN's constant story about me, myself, and I just stops, and for a brief moment, that sense of being a separate self can completely dissolve.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. Understanding this default mode network, this distraction machine in our heads, it does more than just explain why we can't focus. It forces us to ask a much, much bigger question. If your mind is doing its own thing almost half the time, who or what is really in charge?